What's up? Here we are. A momentous movie night for all the Jay's Analysis movie nerds out there. I'm going to assume that you have seen the movie, and if you don't, I'm still going to assume that you've seen it, and I don't care because it will be spoiled. But you could probably guess what happens. And by the way, I didn't actually know when I titled this installment that's what happened. I'm not joking. I literally thought that what I would do is analyze the symbolism of what's going on in the film and discuss what has happened over the, I guess you could say, last half of a century, 60, 70 years to the Bond character due to what he represents, what he signifies, his iconic image as part of the Western ethos, right? He's kind of an iconic propaganda image that represents the West in many ways, especially during the Cold War. And beyond the Cold War, obviously into the, I don't know what we call whatever we're in today, right? Where we have that transition phase of the goofy Roger Moore period, and then we have the the Timothy Dalton period in the 80s, and then we have the Pierce Brosnan period in the 90s, which what was the I don't even know. It was like the Pierce Brosnan installments were like the Roger Moore installments. I mean, they were just so kooky, right? I mean, they were literally clown tier. They're rife with propaganda. We did a whole stream on the Pierce Brosnan installments about 3 or 4 months ago. If you want to go watch that, I'll try to remember to link that one to this installment. It was fun times. It was funny. We was joking. We was having our jollies, our toots and giggles, and now Bond is dead. So the ironic end to the Western ethos, the liberal Enlightenment, pleasure-based man of Bond has met his end. I think everybody kind of suspected this anyway, right? We kind of noticed that this is where they might take the series, the franchise, the recent installments. Now, where they will go from this, I don't know. I don't really care. I think that the Bond series is interesting from many angles. I'm not really that into it per se. It's just a kind of a topic and perfect specimen, right, of propaganda. And it's one of the things that really ties together the things that we cover and analyze: Hollywood, cults, intelligence agencies, and propaganda. And hence why, of course, as everybody here knows, I did my graduate work on this topic. So I know it really well. I don't know everything about it. It's not my main interest in life. There's a whole series of, like you could get a PhD in Bondology, really, if you wanted to. I mean, there's that much research and information just on this kind of goofy fictional topic. But there's reasons for that. One reason is a lot of people don't know that Ian Fleming, for his Assault Unit 30, his kind of private, secret Black Ops team that he created and trained, was involved in training, he would have them read spy fiction. So spy fiction is not divorced from the world of intelligence and the world of espionage, right? We often hear, that's all fake, that's all, movies and Hollywood, and that's true, but there's also quite a bit that's real. And as everybody here knows, the Bond series has a lot of elements from Ian Fleming's own life. Now, I covered this today for a pretty large audience. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw this, so I'm not going to just kind of restate everything that I said in today's show. I want to recap a little bit of that for people on this audience that may not know any of that. It might be new to a lot of these people, right? So we want to give these people an introduction to that topic, just a little bit if they haven't heard it, they're not familiar, and then some of the then we can get to the new material when people are kind of caught up. But, of course, Ian Fleming himself, the creator of the Bond series and novels and what would become the movies, most popular franchise, right, in the history of franchises, right, for a long time. I think it was eventually surpassed by Harry Potter or something like that, something fake and gray. Really, they're all fake and gray now, I guess. Like every franchise has been fake and grayed, haven't they? Yeah. And so everything is just about fake and grayness. And I'm sure everybody in my beautiful, generous, genius audience knows what I'm talking about. Now, tonight's analysis will be half and half. And we will do the second half over on The Rock. So if you're interested in the full installment, it's going to be tonight. And we're going to go pretty deep into things that, we can't talk about over here. And I'm sure you know what that is. And there's the link. It is going to be for, of course, subscribers for the second half. But, Rockfin is a great platform. We got a lot of really based, cool people over there that I like. A lot of my friends, a lot of buddies over there. We got Tristan. We got your boy Sam Tripoli. We got Burmis. We got Richard Grove. All of that crew that, we just love from the bottom of our hearts in a purely hetero way. Nothing floppied about that love. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? No loafers involved. No light-sitting loafers. May your loafers sit light upon you. And may your loafers rest light upon your dainty, tiny toes. Goldfinger! Wow, wow, wow. Goldfinger! Wow, wow, wow. He's the man with the Midas touch. Yeah, we're going to do a little survey too. We're going to touch on the Bond trajectory in terms of the movies. We're going to touch on the deep stuff in Fleming, his life. We're going to get deeper into some of the stuff today that I wanted to talk about, but I got short on time, so I didn't get to really go into the plot of No Time to Die. And No Time to Die, they always have these weird songs too, right? Yes, it will be on the website later, but tonight it'll be live on Rockfin. But yes, of course, it will be given to the beloved website subscribers as well. But Bill Eyelash, right? Billy Eyelash did the song for this one. And I was thinking, why is it so slow, right? When I heard the song before I went and watched the movie, I was like, well, this is so slow. And I'm like, what? Oh, No Time to Die. And I thought, I bet they killed Bond. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I'm like, they're going to kill James Bond. I just knew it. And then I titled this, not actually knowing it, thinking that they would. And they did. And I think it's symbolic. And we're going to talk about what that's symbolic of. But Ian Fleming, right? Ian came from an extremely wealthy family. One of the most wealthy families at that time. And Ian had a privileged upbringing. His dad, Valentine Fleming, was a very prominent banker. His mom was a society woman, a lady of society, right? And she actually wrote to Winston Churchill and said, this boy of mine needs to be in government service. He's smart. Put him in your intelligence branches, right? And that's what happened. He was literally, after his military period, recruited into Special Branch. And Special Branch is what you can imagine special ops. And that is naval psyops. Everybody knows the British Empire was a naval empire. So very important to the British to control the seven seas. They are a mercantile, monetarist empire based on sea trade. They're a sea-faring empire versus land power. Sea power, land power, classic geopolitical drawing of the chessboard. Halford Mackinder, etc. And so Fleming was upper crust, elite, wealthy British establishment, and so he surprisingly wasn't as, what's the word I'm looking for? He wasn't a complete degenerate. Now, he did kind of have a wild streak. He dated different women and whatnot. and really loved one woman early on, and she ended up dying in air raids. So that really hit him pretty hard. He most likely would have married her, but she died young. They were both pretty young when she died in some of the air raids on London. And so he was kind of bitter after this and didn't want to commit. And so then he off and on dated this woman that was really into him for many, many years, but he never wanted to get married because presumably he was, really into the first girl. So that kind of gave him this attitude, being wealthy, being well-traveled, and doing this, psyop stuff, that he didn't really want to bed down and sire offspring, as they say. So he kept her as a girlfriend, and after his various operations that he did, I mentioned Assault Unit 30, this was his idea to basically build what Colonel Fletcher Prouty called the Secret Team. So if you don't know, Colonel Fletcher Prouty has a famous book called The Secret Team, where he outlined his own involvement in the American equivalent of that, right? Like a Team A, Team B, this kind of a thing that would go and do the special operations, black ops. A lot of Green Beret type people, right, were recruited into these things. And this could be anything from espionage, assassinations, fraud, deceptions, right? Anything that might hamper the enemy's intelligence. And so in these different operations, some of the famous ones that people may have heard of would be Operation Mincemeat, where Fleming and company hatched the idea to lay a dead soldier with fake plans in his breast pocket. And when the Germans found this, this misled them, and they went off down this trail of disinformation. So they bought the bait. That was one of the Fleming techniques that he had come up with. Another one was Operation GoldenEye, where he sent a team of guys to go and spy on a potential alliance between Franco and other Axis powers. So they were basically just watching and surveilling and seeing if they could get intel. So there was also the hunt for the German Enigma machine. And of course, this comes into play in From Russia with Love, which is one of the early stories, right? I think I'm going from memory. I think that's the second novel. So Casino Royale is first, and then you get From Russia with Love, if I remember correctly. I think in the terms of the books, though, they made a bad version of Casino Royale with Orson Welles and Peter Sellers, and then they did Dr. No. So I think Dr. No's the first. I'm going from memory. I might be remembering wrong the order. It's been many years, actually, since I've looked at the... make sure I'm right about that. All these details. Remember the secret space program? This seems like ages ago, right? That was only like 6 years ago, where we did this whole presentation on this, which I'm not just doing that. There's other presentations, or there's other information that we're going to do. Yeah, so Dr. No was first in 1962, and then it was From Russia with Love. But there's a lot of interesting, lore around the Bond franchise that we won't really go into, but one of the weird things was Aristotle Onassis wanted to fund the first Bond film. So he was really pushing to let Ian Fleming give him the money to do Dr. No. That ended up not happening, but it shows us the kind of circles that, Ian Fleming was running in. He was running in all these elite banking, corporate, industrial, and Hollywood circles. And one thing that running in these circles allowed him to do was have access to a lot of really powerful people. And this is detailed in a lot of works on the subject. In fact, there's a book that I'm sure you've heard Richard Grove mention many times, which is very relevant to this, and it's called The Irregulars. And this is by Janet Conant, and this is about the British spy ring that was hanging out in Washington amongst Hollywood people that really helped solidify America's role in World War II. And literally, it's Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, and Noel Coward, right? And I'm sure you've heard of Fantastic Mr. Fox, right? I think that's a Roald Dahl story, right? So a lot of kids' stories, right, written by these people. Ian Fleming wrote a kid's story. I think he did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, didn't he? I'm going from memory here. Again, it's been a long time since I thought about a lot of this stuff, but odd topics for people who are basically super spies or master manipulators, actors, etc. But what happens, of course, is that this this circle had befriended so many powerful people in the U.S., so many wealthy people, lawmakers, politicians, right? JFK famously, right, was a fan of the Bond novels. He would read them at night and commented on how he really enjoyed Ian Fleming's Bond novels. So, even by the 60s, this had really, taken off, was very popular. And so they saw very early on the power and potential for these types of films and stories as propaganda. And that's precisely what they will become in the Cold War, is very powerful means of propaganda. And one thing, as I said today, that Fleming was really pioneering was kind of extending, I guess you could say, the approach to propaganda that we'd seen in people like H.G. Wells. So certainly Fleming wasn't the first to use fiction as a means of propaganda. This was something that I guess you could say all empires have been doing, back to the Aeneid or Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen. But we see it very clearly in other writers, T.E. Lawrence, William Somerset Maugham, Graham Greene, H.G. Wells. All of these individuals had some degree of connection or association to British intelligence and Secret Service work. Now, H.G. Wells didn't directly have a connection, but I go ahead and include him in the group because he was basically working as a propagandist for the Royal Society. So that might as well just be the Secret Intelligence Service, because the Royal Society runs that too. So they're all part of the same power structure, is the point here, even though H.G. Wells, no, he wasn't technically a spy. Whereas the others had done intelligence work in some capacity. As you guys know, the original 007 was, of course, John Dee, the court magician and astrologer to Elizabeth, and he would always sign his name with the 007 or the 2 balls and a cane. And I'm sure you can all figure out what 2 balls and a cane is. It's a Masonic esoteric symbol that signifies a mapipi. Yes, that's right. That's what it signifies. I commented, of course, today that I think that the Enochian gibberish was most likely something to do with ciphers and codes. So when I think this Enochian magic was being developed, and all the symbols and sigils, by John Dee and Edward Kelly, given the fact that John Dee was sort of the top, not just astrologer but spy, he was Queen Elizabeth's top spy, and she famously had just like a vast array of spies. In fact, there's a famous painting of Elizabeth, and her gown, that her pelt that she's wearing is full of eyes. And she has so many eyes because she was known as having such a vast spy network. And again, this is just the old British tradition. Right? This is the British imperial model of hiring anyone and everyone to be spies. Even the little street urchins become your spies. This is in some of the Charles Dickens novels, isn't it? Who's the Artful Dodger, right? Doesn't he work for another guy, that creepy creeper dude who has a bunch of like street urchin spies, right? In the Sherlock Holmes stories, Sherlock Holmes has a spy network that he has set up amongst the homeless people, right? And this comes up at different times in various Sherlock Holmes stories, but actually in the history of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock and Mycroft are basically British intelligence. In fact, the address 221B Baker Street is intended to be some intelligence hub or apparatus or safe house, and that's, I think, very clear. In, if I recall, it's been many years since I read the Conan Doyle stories, but I'm pretty sure Mycroft is identified as British intelligence, at least in the new series with Benedict Slumberbatch. He is identified as British intelligence, right? So this then is the history of British intelligence. They were kind of the first to pioneer the use of fiction in this way around the turn of the century, where you have because of the Official Secrets Act, you couldn't put your secrets out there. You can just leak them. So the way that they would get around this when they left their civil service, their espionage intelligence service time period, they would then write the fiction stories that told the real events, right? Again, this is fairly common, and even in the West, right? Even in the U.S., we have this notion of, you know, a lot of these, what do you call them? I don't know what to call them, like the Robert Ludlum Bourne series, or, you know, this kind of stuff is written by intelligence people that formerly worked in those capacities, and most of those novels, they're kind of propaganda too, right? I mean, I remember I listened back in the day to a few of the Bourne series novels on audio one time on a long drive, and it was very obvious it was all like anti-Russian propaganda, and it was just total, you know, my patriotism, right? My America, right? We're gonna get all them commies, you know, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, commies, really? What year is this? You know, so one point of pro that we'll give to Ian is that although really the entire ethos of the West, you know, what is classical liberalism is hedonism and this kind of stuff, the degeneracy, the figure of Bond himself represents that. Keep that in mind, that he actually represents the attempt at an Ubermensch character who really only lives for pleasure and for pragmatic reasons. Bond is an orphan who had been taken in under the service of the Queen. And so his mom, right, is this stand-in Queen figure. I mean, he doesn't meet the Queen. Maybe in some of the movies he might, or something like that. But, you know, in the Pierce Brosnan installments, it's Judi Dench, right, and she's mom and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, she is a cold, callous character who plays that role to keep him as a cold, callous character, and he's described in the novels as a machine. Bond is just a killing machine, and so in a way he's kind of the perfect soldier. And in fact, in the novels, it's actually hinted that he is a mind-controlled assassin. In fact, at one point he actually undergoes mind control. Right? I think it's You Only Live Twice. He tries to get married, which we're going to mention in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Which is hinted at in the new installments, right? They kind of have a lot of throwbacks to the old Bond films and stories. But of course, Bond can't get married, right? It's never going to work for this dude. Not so much because he couldn't pull it off, but that his life, the style of life that he's lived for so long, really makes it impossible for him to trust, right? It's like Mulder, trust no one, right? Because at any point, he could be working with some Spectre operative or something like this. And that's what we get in the new one, where the Swan girl has basically, he thinks, betrayed him in some capacity, you know, trying to get him killed at the beginning of the film. But what I wanted to say that was a pro for Fleming in terms of his own personal life was that in terms of his library, he actually had quite a few works on issues like eugenics, depopulation, and so forth. And this was because he wanted to understand the mindset of, you know, the Reich that he was opposing and doing the black operations against during World War II. So he didn't adopt the Malthusian worldview, which is ironic and kind of a contradiction, because at least there's no evidence from that Fleming, you know, was pro-eugenics, pro-dysgenics, and bought into this Malthusianism. The entire establishment that he's essentially serving, right? The establishment that Bond serves is permeated by that Malthusian ideology. And we really see it in certain villains and characters like Blofeld, right? Obviously. You know, like the Rami Malek character, who's Dr. No in the new installment. They are Malthusian. And I think that was one insightful element to the new film, No Time to Die, was that we get this villain who is Malthusian beyond all the other Malthusian villains, right? I mean, he beats Hugo Drax. And if we remember in the original Moonraker episode, not the movie, but the book, it's about the Nazi V2 rocket program. And in the novel, Hugo Drax wants vengeance against England And so he's going to fire these V2 rockets, right? And destroy or whatever. And of course, Bond thwarts this. But more interesting in this regard of predictive programming than the novel is the movie Moonraker, because Hugo Drax, as we said, wants to take from all the races and basically find the hottest babe from each race and create a lineage and a progeny from them. And so his whole plan, as he explains at the end of Moonraker, is to depopulate the Earth through a kind of error-born release, interestingly, and then be off-world for a bit. He's got a breakaway civilization. And then once Earth has kind of healed from the mass death and whatever, he's going to come back and repopulate, he says, as a new Adam and Eve. He's like, I will be Adam, and I will have a harem of Eves. And there will be a new order, a new, world, a new right. And what do we know? Jeff Stein-Effrey literally had this plan. So this is not far off from reality. I think that Fleming was telling us that, or at least the stories are telling us, that there really are people who have this kind of a worldview, right? Who have this maniacal, like, I'm going to restart the entire race, and I'm going to impregnate everyone, and I will be like the father of a new humanity. I will be like God, is essentially what Drax says. And that's why Moonraker is, for all of its ridiculousness, all of its goofiness, it's literally one of the most ridiculous of the Bond films. Floating around in space, and it's all preposterous. But the underlying story here is very relevant, especially to what's happening right now. So we talked about this today. I won't rehearse all that, but we'll give some points to Fleming for not being Malthusian, although, again, the whole power structure and the thing that he's defending ends up being Malthusian. Because if the pleasure principle is ultimately what I live by and what matters, pragmatic pleasure principle, then it stands to reason that as an atomized individual, I should do everything in my power and even outside of my power to make sure that you don't get access to the limited number of resources. So the whole idea of the resource war, the scarcity of resources, is kind of programmed into this Western atomized ethos. And then you can see then why that's who would come up with the idea of Malthusianism. Well, there's not enough food, there's not enough water to go around, and so we can't have too many people. And in fact, not only that, we actually got to bring it way down. Most people around got to go. That's the attitude of Malthusianism and dysgenics. Now, in the story, we see multiple Bond villains who kind of have that attitude, but in this installment, it really comes to a head with the figure of Rami Malek, or Dr. No. Now, in the old ones, I think Dr. No was just kind of a generic Smersh villain. I don't think he's even Spectre yet, right? Spectre isn't on the scene yet. So Dr. No is just kind of representing the Eurasian communist specter or figure, right? I don't mean specter in terms of the organization. But at that time, it was Smersh. So in the first couple Bond stories, Bond is fighting Soviet NKVD counterintelligence known as Smersh. And Smersh has as its dictum, Smetspionen, right? Death to spies. They are a counterintelligence force that is there to kill people like Bond. And this is based on the real entity called Smersh. NKVD had Smersh. And so the first few Bond films are set in the Cold War. They're set in this period when, right after World War II, now we've got to worry about the, Eurasian communist threat. And the only way to combat this is with the liberal freedoms, liberal democracy of the West, right? Neoliberalism is really the only thing. But as you guys know, I think everybody in this audience is well aware, we believe those are two false dialectics. They're both atheistic, both premised on materialism. The only difference being that one side of the dialectic prefers the collective, the other side of the dialectic prefers the individuation, the atomized individual. Apart from that, it's really two competing control structures that the collectivist Eurasian Soviet bloc communism failed to achieve. So they did not win. The West won the Cold War, and so what becomes the victor of the 20th century is neither fascism nor communism nor monarchism or any of those older positions, but liberal democracy. So liberal democracy, so-called, wins. It wins the 2 world wars and the Cold War. And as I'm sure everybody in this audience knows, liberal democracy is really just the front for oligarchy, right? So it's not actually a system based around natural law and rights, right? This worship of rights. It's actually a system that is very malleable and really based on the moving and swaying the masses on the basis of their base desires is really all it is. That's it. And this was all perfected during the wartime studies on Bernays' material, right? I just reposted and re-listened to my analysis of Edward Bernays' propaganda, which we did about 4 or 5 years ago. I just put that up on the Rockfin and re-listened to that and realized how applicable all that is to what's happened in the last couple of years and what's going on with Bond. Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, Bond is essentially a perfect advertisement for the Western ethos. He represents the Western Übermensch of the individuated man beyond good and evil. Bond is a kind of Nietzschean Übermensch. Absolutely, 100%. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just simply saying that that's what he is what he represents. And I came across some of the old Cold War era Pravoslavy back when, so there used to be, it was either TASS news agency or Pravoslavy, I forget which one, but they were a Soviet news agency, and they were deconstructing Bond. It was really interesting to read the Soviet perspective of James Bond during the Cold War, and amazingly, they are right. I mean, they're not right in their worldview, but what they exegete, the exegesis that they give of who Bond is, what he represents, is totally correct. Bond represents the materialist, nihilist, pleasure-based principle of the West, which is just as atheistic and nihilistic as the collectivist, social-based order or attempts at order of the various communisms, right? Whether it's Marxism, whether it's Soviet bloc communism, whether it's Maoism, Leninism, Stalinism, Trotskyism, doesn't matter. All of those are really centered around basic presuppositions about the primacy of the collective as opposed to the primacy of the individual. The primacy of dialectical materialism or dialectical historical materialism, right? There's different factions and different debates and schools within all the Marxist tradition. So we're not going to get into all that, but suffice it to say that the Cold War really is there, I think, to really set up this the free West versus the collectivist East, right? And that's a lot. That's the point, is that was actually part of this big scale story and deception. Because really what the Cold War does is allow the supra power block structures, UN, World Health, IMF, these structures really kind of step into the fray to say, oh, now because of, nuclear weapons, now because of the danger of East and West destroying each other, we've got to have this international body that has the power, right? Now, they had called for that at the end of World War I. That's the League of Nations. They called for that after World War II. This is the United Nations. And through the Cold War, what you get is more and more and more of this call for the international structure to police the world order so that we can have peace, security, blah, blah, blah. All the things that Julian Huxley wrote as the philosophy of the United Nations. And as everybody knows, what is the philosophy of the United Nations? Well, Julian Huxley actually says it is a genetics-based, biometric, dysgenic, technocratic future. That's it. Everything that we're seeing today, World Economic Forum, Great Reset, that's all it's 100% in lockstep with Julian Huxley's book, The Philosophy of the United Nations. philosophy of UNESCO to be technical. So again, it's amazing that Fleming had really been kind of telling us that the attitude of a lot of these elites, and maybe in his day he genuinely didn't think that it was all of them. Right? Maybe all of them weren't dysgenics, depop, madmen. But he had been saying there's these people with this idea of mass depop. They want to break away civilization. They want to use these different bio scenarios to get the numbers down. We really got to get these. If we do a good job, we can get that number down, if you know what I mean. And of course, as I already talked about the occult element, we went pretty deep into in the past. Dennis Wheatley, of course, the other famous, well-known fiction writer from British intelligence who did the books like Devil Rides Out. And if you watch I highly recommend watching the movie if you've never seen it. It's kind of cheesy, but Christopher Lee plays this professor who's like a cult, he knows everything about the occult, and he battles this guy who is literally based on Crowley. His name is Mokata in the story, and he's basically set up a mind control satanic cult amongst the elite in England. And the Christopher Lee character has to, battle against this guy and stop him from sacrificing people. And Dennis Wheatley literally based the Mokata character on Crowley. Crowley isn't only the basis of that. He's also the basis of Le Chiffre and Blofeld. And so that's come out in a lot of the recent Bondologists like Ben McIntyre. They've talked about these various influences on Fleming. Now, Fleming never met Crowley himself, but what happened was Fleming was... at the suggestion of Maxwell Knight and Dennis Wheatley, people kind of above him when he was doing his PSYOPs work, they suggested this plan. They hatched this plan together, and Fleming was involved in it to get Rudolf Hess to fly into Scotland, right? And everybody's heard of this, or the famous night flight to Scotland, which was all a ruse, which Hess fell for. Well, the way they did this was to get Crowley to work as an asset to set up this whole scenario, so that Crowley would give this astrological prediction, which Himmler and Hess and different people bought into, right? Because some of the high-ups in the Reich believed in the occult, they believed in astrology. The British intelligence was able to exploit that weakness, and they got Crowley to tell Hess that, if you fly to Scotland, it will be victorious, and this is the perfect night. And he fell for it, because like an idiot, right? Who would, in their right mind, would believe Crowley? I mean, just dumb, right? So the ruse worked, and this is a famous incident that was connected to Ian Fleming. He had an involvement in that. But another thing I should mention, along with William Stevenson, a.k.a. codename Intrepid, Roald Dahl, Noel Coward, they were instrumental, and Fleming, in getting the U.S. to step into World War II and to take on that role of being policemen of the world. So the movement from the U.S. as a non-interventionist power quite literally was done at the request and influence of this circle of the irregulars, who really put pressure on FDR and people in the U.S. to, you don't just need to come into the war, you actually need to set up a special intelligence asset unit. And British intelligence came over, all the characters I listed, and they gave Bill Donovan the whole plan of how you do this. And so the OSS in 1942 is actually set up at the request and consultation of all these people. So now there were intelligence people prior to this, sure. The Inquiry is a famous example. I mean, U.S. had intelligence prior to this, but the feature of intelligence prior to this period was that it was done by the military, right? I mean, it stands to reason that typically intelligence work is an attaché or connected to the military. But the change here is that now the OSS, although it may have a lot of military or former military men or people sort of sheep dip or recruited into it, it's not a military thing anymore. And some writers have even commented that really the OSS and CIA is almost like a private army, intelligence army for the Rockefellers. I think Servando Gonzalez and I think F. William Ingdahl characterizes the OSS and CIA as that, and I think that's probably true. Yeah, because we're not we're sort of a parallel government outside of the elected officials. Now there's, we have the, Intelligence Oversight Committee and all this sort of, front stuff that gives the appearance of it being regulated, but everybody knows that the intelligence agencies do whatever they want. They're not answerable to any elected officials. I mean, countless intelligence people have come out as whistleblowers all saying this. It's very, very well known, right? Shouldn't even really be in dispute. I mean, it's just like obvious, right? This is what we mean by the deep STATE, right? So sort of this parallel government within a government that operates in the shadows, the shadow government. And this is where it comes from. And very easy to see if this is true, very easy to figure it out. A lot of the people involved in this are very famous. They're very well-known people like James Jesus Angleton, people like George W. Bush Sr. I mean, very well-known. It shouldn't even be hard to figure out like what this is, how this works. Yet, masses and masses of people have no idea how this works. And they think that these entities, the national security apparatus, is there to protect them and to help them. And why do most people think that? Because of the movies, right? Because of the power of all of these zillions of movies and the zillions of dollars put into the propaganda. So the masses believe by sort of default that the national security apparatus is there to protect and defend America, her Constitution, and her interests. Really? Really? You believe that? Now, there may be people in these structures that genuinely believe in the principles of America and Americanism. But I don't think anybody nowadays is under the impression, who has an IQ over 100, is under the impression that these entities exist to serve and help and defend America in our day. I mean, come on. You'd have to be pretty gullible to believe. I mean, you had to be gullible to believe this back in the 90s, in the 2000s, right? But to believe it now, I mean, you got to be a bona fide slow boy. I don't know. I was saying codename Intrepid. That is William Stevenson's name, who was the agent of British intelligence in Canada. And William Stevenson actually had his own like office in Rockefeller Center. I mean, like he was literally just reporting to the Rockefellers, right? And I think that's because at this time the British banking interests and the American corporate banking elites had already kind of aligned. This is the Anglo-American Establishment. And so, yeah, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds had joined their families a long time ago as well. But when Quigley wrote Anglo-American Establishment, I mean, this is the power structure that he's talking about. And he says that Anglo-American Establishment elite, that's who really engineered America into turning into this imperial force. And that's really what the entities that were set up, like the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, they were set up to do that, to help move and transition America into being international policemen for the global elite. Again, it's actually public. It used to be on there used to be a history of the CFR that was on their webpage that explained all that. So I don't know if that's still there. It may be taken down. But, Fleming is essentially a worker for this system. How far he knew what they wanted to bring, I guess that's up for debate. I really genuinely think a lot of these 40s and 50s era dudes, I think they really thought they were fighting for the right cause and the right side. Because remember, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have the speed and ease of access of information. I mean, even when Tragedy and Hope came out, I mean, nobody would have been reading Tragedy and Hope except like CIA section chiefs. I mean, that wasn't written for normies. It wasn't. The only people who would have been reading that would be like professors and section chiefs. That's it. That's who it was written for, right? So, today we have the ability to, in 5 minutes, learn and assess the lies and history of the 20th century in a summed up version of Tragedy and Hope that quick. Right? in the 1960s and 70s, it would have taken you years, research, right? Going up the power structure rungs before you would have even heard of something like Tragedy and Hope, right? So we're in a totally different, weird situation. Somebody gave an analysis that I think was correct, where they said that the average guy with the cell phone, just in terms of potential, right, has the ability to access with ease and speed more information than the head of intelligence in the 70s would have had. So like the head of the CIA under Carter or somebody, right? The average person with a cell phone can get better, quicker, more information. So think about how tremendous that is in terms of like, this is a totally different world, right? And I can even speak of my own, I'm the unique generation that has lived. I mean, yeah, you could say that with boomers too, but we are the generation, because the boomers are going to die, and then we're going to be the last generation that remembers, well, I guess there's the Gen X above me, but when they die, then we'll be the last generation that remembers the life before the internet. So I remember daily life that had nothing to do with the internet. Nobody even knew what that was. Nobody had any idea that there would be something like that. And then just gradually, right, in the mid-90s, you start to see the rollout of computers, the rollout of gadgets, the rollout of these things that even in, late 90s, early 2000s, people had home computers and everybody was getting the dial-up, right? At least in most houses that you go to, people have dial-up and stuff. But it still hadn't at that point seemed to really change the world. The world didn't seem to be that different than it was in 1995 or 1990. And then after the Big 9 event, the world, obviously, there was a big shift in the world at that time. And everybody who remembers it was alive. I was 18. I was like, 19. No, 18. Let's see. 99, 20. No, I was 22. 21, 22 when 9/11. So I was, an adult. I knew kind of what was going on. And the world changed tremendously, obviously. I'm coming to a point with all this. And one thing that I never would have thought of until I got deep into the history of the NSA and the history of DARPA was that the internet itself, a lot of people don't know this, the internet itself actually comes out of wartime cryptography. And so when ARPA was doing a lot of research into sending information, right, it actually comes out of like wartime attempts to get information to the other, your guys in the field. So if you don't know what number stations are, right, the NSA comes out of these old Cold War structures where they would set up number stations which would relay the messages to the spies that are out in the field. There's still number stations today because there are still spies, but a lot of the number stations don't really, they're kind of abandoned, but there are still some that are emitting those weird, messages, tones, records playing, dolls, or children talking. It's weird, really weird stuff. And some of these we don't even know what they are or why they're doing what they do. I don't know if everybody, there's probably some guy in the government, like Secret Service, who knows what all these number stations are all about, but I don't know if anybody even knows. But long story short, this is the origins of where the NSA comes from. And this is where the internet comes from. ARPANET, DARPANET, DARPA. Everybody is using DARPA cryptography right now as we do this live stream. And one thing that I realized when I was reading into all that many years ago was that what this shows us is that the internet, it wasn't a gift. It wasn't, potentially, I guess you could say it could be. But I've always felt like the internet itself ultimately is probably a trap. Because, I mean, I think even Julian Assange said this, right? He's like, the internet is the greatest spying tool the world has ever seen. And Julian Assange is essentially saying what I'm saying. Yes, exactly, because the internet comes out of the wartime cryptography apparatus. How can we transfer information in the quickest, most reliable way? Now, how does this relate to James Bond? Well, what's one of the main features of all the Bond stories, and all the Bond movies especially? Q Branch. Q Branch is DARPA. Not literally, but he's essentially DARPA, right? And British intelligence, their version of the NSA is GCHQ. GCHQ, Q Branch, I think that's what Q represents. And so I've noticed a trend. A lot of these gadgets, okay, Bond movies and stories promote the gadgets, and then the gadgets become the norm. And really, they're all traps, I think. And let me give you an example. I just noticed this one today because I had just gone and seen No Time to Die. Where's my... Okay. Now, I'm not going to... Okay, here's the first link. Obviously, I can't play this right now because we're on YouTube, and it would be a copyright ding. But if you're in the live chat, you're going to see it right now. So this is a clip from Spectre or Skyfall, the recent Daniel Craig installment. And you'll notice that this is about nanotechnology that can read the blood. And the nanotechnology reads your blood to give you a readout of your health situation, right? And I want to say shout out to everybody. We got 400 nerds in the house. We just passed 400 live. Welcome, everybody. If you would, please hit like and share. We're doing a super deep dive on Bond and all of this espionage and intelligence stuff. And I remember when I was watching Spectre that there was that sequence where Q injects Bond with nanotechnology that can assess his blood and his health. And I mean, I'm like, wow, right? I mean, I remember, I think I even wrote or did a podcast at the time because Spectre came out in 2015-16 about this topic. And what did we just see the other day in the news, right? We covered it on the 4th Hour a couple weeks ago. Look at that. 60 Minutes. What is 60 Minutes talking about? A sensor in your bloodstream that can tell you if you're sick. Nano chip in the blood, which, by the way, doesn't exist. And if you talk about it, it's a conspiracy theory, even though it's on 60 Minutes. Right. Where did we hear about smart blood? Oh, in the movie 6 years ago. Smart blood in the movie 6 years ago. Which doesn't exist, and you can't talk about it even though it does exist, and it's in the 60 Minutes series that I just linked you there. And who developed it? DARPA. So what I'm getting at is that it's not just that the Bond series is about espionage and these, geopolitical, machinations and this and that. I mean, even the Q Branch stuff, which represents DARPA, GCHQ, the tech, is consistently putting into the stories the technology that is later rolled out after 5, 10, 20 years. And that's a consistent thing. For example, in The Man with the Golden Gun, not the novel. The novel doesn't have directed energy weapons. It's just a big-ass pistol that's gold. In the movie Man with the Golden Gun, Christopher Lee is Scaramanga. What is Scaramanga's weapon? A giant directed energy weapon. Now, that came out in the late 70s. Nobody knew what directed energy weapons were in the late 70s, except for, I don't know, maybe people that studied Nikola Tesla. I don't know, but 99.999, nobody knew about this kind of stuff. Maybe they knew about microwaves, right? But they didn't know about directed energy weapons. And yet, that's the plot of Man with a Golden Gun. In View to a Kill, a couple years later, when Roger Moore as Bond goes to visit, he goes to visit Chris Walken, who is a very nice villain. Very nice. Wow. I will dance for you. If you've never seen Communion, watch him do the cha-cha with the aliens. It's very bizarre and hilarious. But Christopher Walken is the villain, Zorn Industries, and Zorn Industries is involved in breeding. They're doing genetic experimentation to produce the fittest offspring. And if you remember, Zorn has the plan to basically use earthquake weapons to destroy Silicon Valley, to corner the market and run the world. But there's a sequence when Bond comes in to Zorn Industries and he sits down. Zorn scans him and pulls up his files on the internet. And that was 1983-84, right? And he's already got like facial scanning technology. He's already pulling up databases, and what it has to apparently be the internet, right? Because he wouldn't have access. He wouldn't know who this person is unless he has access to some sort of database. And there are, by the way, multiple instances of 80s films showing us the internet. We mentioned many times, Running Man with Arnold. Arnold buys his plane tickets on the Infonet before he tries to escape the dystopian world that he's in. Or he's going to fly away to Hawaii, right? Remember that? He's wearing his Hawaiian shirt and he types on the computer on the Infonet and buys his plane tickets. So gadgets in movies are more than gadgets. They're usually, in many cases, especially in the Bond films, kind of showing us the way that technology would invade our lives, the way that surveillance would invade our lives. And everybody, I'm sure, remembers what was the plot of Spectre, the new Spectre, right? The very one with the smart blood, the nano blood. The plot of Spectre was that Blofeld was essentially blackmailing and corralling the Five Eyes intelligence nations into his control through staging fake flags, crashing economies, and if they didn't go along with it, they would get an economic collapse or big terror events, right? And so when you do go along with it, Blofeld then has access through the back doors, through the Promise technology that is real, to everybody's CCTV cameras and everybody's hard drives, everything. So he basically has the all-seeing eye of surveillance. That's his whole thing. And what did we see in No Time to Die? One of the central MacGuffins of the movie is Blofeld's bionic eye. And that eye is a way that he uses that to communicate to one of his henchmen. And the henchman takes the eye, the all-seeing eye of Blofeld, and places it at the Spectre party up there on the dais where everybody can see it. And Blofeld speaks to everybody from this eyeball. Right. But Blofeld, we find out, is just sort of this character who's kind of meant to pass away. And who's the real plotter behind all this? Well, it's Rami Malek, and Rami Malek is playing Dr. No. And Dr. No has the most radical Malthusian agenda, which is to kill basically everyone. So they just keep upping the ante, but the ironic thing is that this is kind of really the case, right? In the real world, we have these people that are like this, that want to up the ante, that want to, Georgia Guidestones, right? But I thought it was fascinating that in Spectre, it was the all-seeing eye of Blofeld identified as the total information awareness DARPA all-seeing eye of tech, like Sauron. That's the symbolism and meaning of Blofeld's bionic eye in the new one. And that's precisely how the technocracy was intended to be implemented. And if you remember the storyline of the Daniel Craig installments, right, from Casino Royale to Quantum of Solace to Skyfall to Spectre to No Time to Die, there's a series of color-coded bad guys, right? There's Mr. White, there's Mr. Green. And remember what Mr. Green's plot was? Well, we covered it today. It was to crash economies, consolidate resources, create artificial scarcity. Exactly what happened in 2020. Exactly what's happening now through the hacks, fake flag hacks. Do you remember the bad guy in Skyfall? Silva, played by Javier Bardem. Again, an amorphous Assange type of character with blonde hair who's this rogue MI6 guy who hacks everything, right? The rogue hackers. Cyber Polygon. Skyfall is Cyber Polygon. The cyber there will be the hacks. There will be hacks that will be far beyond anything that we saw in 2020, right? Klaus told us this. Klaus is Blofeld, dude. It's that simple. What is all this yapping about that I'm doing? It's Klaus is Blofeld. That's it. Okay? If you can't figure this out, prove me wrong. How am I wrong when Klaus literally writes books and says the very thing that the Bond villains are doing? So, again, each one of these installments, right? Mr. Green, what was he all about? The Green Agenda. Mr. Green in Quantum of Solace is about, it's the Green Agenda, quantification, controlling quantification, and ultimately it's to wreck the dollar and consolidate. That was his plan. And consolidate resources and create artificial scarcity by like owning water. That was his whole plot, right? He was going to own all the water in Brazil or somewhere. I forget where it was. But that was basically what Mr. Green was up to. And then we get Silva, right? He's going to hack everything, destroy everything through a cyber polygon. Skyfall is basically about cyber polygon. Spectre is about the backdoor technology and the technocratic surveillance grid. That's Blofeld's whole plan. And then No Time to Die. Well, I'm going to break that down in the next hour over at Rock. Head on over to the Rock. But hey, we got some awesome super chats, and I want to remind you guys that why am I so hype? How am I doing this? How am I so high IQ and based right now? How is it possible that this man can do what he does? Well, one of the aids that we are, not AIDS, not little AIDS and not the AIDS, but one of the positive aids, right? And I don't mean my AIDS test was positive. I mean, one of the positive aids by which we are able to exercise this tremendously based presentation the way that we do, recalling all of this from memory, is precisely because of Chalk.com. Yes, I'm going to give props and shout outs to Chalk. Again, the Tomcat is right now my favorite. I have expanded into also now trying out the Irish Moss, which is for women too, right? Women can definitely benefit from this because if you're lacking minerals, the Irish Moss is packed with minerals. We know that the ground is nutrient deficient, right? Minerals have been lacking in our ground for a long time due to overuse, due to mistreatment, due to who knows, geospraying. I mean, who knows, right? But we know that a lot of the food is lacking in nutrients. I mean, part of the reason that, I had to go as Tristan, aka Little AIDS, helped us do over into the keto carnivore realm was precisely because of, just that all this plant-based stuff, it ain't working, dude. I'm not getting what I need from plants. And a good addition to that, whether you're keto or carnivore, I know it's not really carnivore to take supplements, but if you are not super strict, and I'm not like super, super strict about carnivore, I do, deviate, and I do have a little bit of carbs here and there. And so for me, Chalk Daily is I take basically two things. I take right now Tomcat and the Daily. So the Daily is purified Shilajit. It optimizes the processes of your endocrine system. Actually shown to boost testosterone 20% in 90 days. Good for memory retention and recall. We want the total recall. Right? Total recall. We want total recall. That's what we're after here. Okay? Shit! Screw you, Cohagen! Right? We want total recall. And I'm literally going into total recall mode right now. Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to Mars. See, how could I do that if I wasn't powered by Chalk.com, by She Legit? Basically what you've got in the Chalk Daily is their She Legit. You've got the Mucuna bean extract, which lowers stress. You've got the muesli extract, which is a rare herb from India that eliminates fatigue. More than 25 alkaloids. It aids in digestive support. Increases reproductive health. Hey, boy. We saw some stuff today going around about a machine that zaps the balls. I'm not joking. They're pushing a machine that zaps your balls so that I'm not joking, that your semen will be sterile. There were ads going around for this stupid ass ball zapper. Like, you literally wear a bug zapper on your nuts. I'm not joking. It's a real product that they're pushing. And it's supposed to feel like a warm bath. Pretty sure that shocking your nuts does not feel like a warm bath, but it's supposed to make you feel like a warm bath. And then you can go be a mega coomer and never have kids. Whoa, dude, right? Straight up crazy. This is cartoon world. Cartoon dystopia. We're in the cartoon dystopia where instead of a bug zapper, they literally want you to strap up with a ball zapper. I'm not kidding. It's a real thing. I didn't believe when my buddy Seaton sent it to me. I was like, that's not real. What? No, it's real. So what we want to do is do the opposite of all that. Like, we want to not have anything to do with that nonsense. And that's why I am such a fan of both the Daily, the Chalk Daily, and the Tomcat. But I'm also going to update you on my experimentation. I'm basically a giant human guinea pig. Or am I a giant hamster? I don't know. Maybe both at the same time. Who knows? We can identify as whatever we want, right? So I identify as a lab hamster for Chalk. And I'm happy to do that. And I will report to you my experience with the Irish moss and the 7 wonders. But if you want 60% off and you want to support this show, be sure and use the promo code J60. Now, J60, as you guys know, gives you 60% off. And Chalk is a awesome Bayes company. They are longtime supporters of Jay's Analysis, and they are one of our official sponsors. We have ascended to the levels of e-celebdom by which we now have official sponsors. Like, whoa, dude, right? But definitely get that. Definitely shout out to our bros, and follow them on their social media too. The guys over on they're on Telegram. They're putting out like Bayes stuff every day. So really happy with those guys. Zach for $50. Whoa, dude, $50. Zach says, "Thank you for giving me the confidence to tell Pinker to get his head of his ass." Oh, I bet you mean Steven Pinker. From this stream? Or did the Chalk.com give you the confidence to go refute Steven Pinker? Or do you mean that the argumentation in some of the podcasts and talks that dealt with materialism, atheism, refuting that, precept tag, presumably that's what you mean. And if that's the case, then Zach, more power to you. I hope that you astoundingly and nobly defeat Steven Pinker. I assume that's who you mean. Byzantine Bigo, $5. What is your favorite Bond movie to watch? So whether it's Bond movies or any movie, for me, it usually comes down to mood. So really depends on the mood that I'm in. Because sometimes I'm in a mood to watch just the worst movie that I can find. I'm not joking. Sometimes I'm literally trying to do that. That's going to be one of our recurring series of our riffing. We're gonna riff like we did the Kathy Ireland Alien from LA. And remember, she was tweeting at us. She was tweeting back and forth. She was talking smack. That was crazy. I'm like, I'm watching Alien from LA, which I remember watching in high school when it was on Mystery Science Theater. And then I tweeted at Kathy Ireland, and she replied. It was just crazy. It was like, is this some kind of weird Mandela world? I don't know. And I don't really think that. I'm just joking. But so we will continue, right, to do the bad movies because I love riffing on bad movies. And everybody seemed to enjoy that. It was a lot of fun. So I watch bad movies when I'm looking for something like that. And then typically, if I'm in a mood for good movies, I'm trying to find a good movie. And those nowadays are very hard to find. Most movies suck. Movies are pretty much garbage now. So I resort to 80s and 90s and old movies. Jamie and I have been watching quite a few black and white classics. And even those were kind of like getting through the big name ones. So we're getting into like the obscure noir movies now, ones that you've never heard of, right? So I'm like digging up like crappy 50s noir films that nobody's ever heard of. So, we're getting pretty out there even with those. I'm sorry, this is way off topic. What's the favorite Bond film? So I kind of like with each of the Bonds, I have my favorite ones. I like... Trying to think of my favorite Sean Connery. I don't really I like all the Sean Connerys. They're all pretty good. Dr. No's good. Goldfinger's good. Roger Moore ones are just kind of terrible. But I have to say, Live and Let Die is a lot of fun. And it's not PC, so it's fun. It's actually fun to go and watch the absurdity and the craziness of and it's got this, that weird voodoo element with Baron Samedi, and so Jamie and I really like Live and Let Die. It's a lot of fun. For my favorite Roger Moore, Moonraker's crazy, but I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch. Diamonds Are Forever is a lot of fun to watch. I like the Timothy Dalton ones, both of them, because they have a lot of truth, right? I mean, you've got British intelligence teamed up with the Mujahideen. Hello, right? The freedom fighters. Exactly what happened. Just like Rambo teamed up with Mujahideen. And the figure that Timothy Dalton teams up with from the Mujahideen, he's basically Bin Laden. I'm not joking. Go watch it. And then we just recently did the Pierce Brosnan stream, covering all those about, 4 or 5 months ago. That was a lot of fun. Maybe 8 months ago. I don't know. But those are all weird and insightful in their own ways. But that one probably, The World Is Not Enough. That's probably my favorite one. Because the villain, Sophie Marceau, is Orthodox. And that, that's just so, it's like obvious propaganda there, right? She's this Orthodox oil heiress who's, anyway, you get the idea. We broke all that down. I like that one a lot. That was a lot of fun. And then Casino Royale is a really good movie. Quantum of Solace, people hated it, but it has a lot of revelation in it, right? And we'll get to some of that. We'll get deeper into that in over on Rockfin in a little bit. But anyway, so yeah, I don't have an easy answer to that. Sonny Crockett, New World Order. Sonny Crockett versus New World Order. I'm dressed kind of like Sonny Crockett here. The empire will fall. There will be upheavals. Ultimately, the cosmic beings will prevail. We cosmic beings, and the scum-sucking elite will reap. Hashtag white-pilled. Whew, strong words there, boy. That's Don Johnson coming at you. Looking for a heartbeat. Yes, Don Johnson had an 80s album and a single one-hit wonder. Right? Looking for a heartbeat. Look up the Don Johnson music video. It's a treat. Green Feathers, $10. Thank you for another great topic, Jay. Bond is definitely the fictional poster child of the Anglo-American corporate elite Übermensch. I just started uploading short videos on Orthodox content. Feel free to check them out, and God bless. All right, so Green Feathers is uploading Orthodox content. He says check out his stuff, and we will definitely do that. His channel, I presume, is, yes, Green Feathers. So check his stuff out if you're interested. Games Bond, $5. I've been considering Tomcat for boosting the T. Yes. We're talking about Mr. T. Okay. We're not just talking about T. We're not talking about low T. We're talking about freaking Mr. T level stuff, dude. How have you liked it? I have liked it. I do cycle it. I don't take it every day because it's pretty stout. In fact, I made the mistake of taking 2 or 3 one day, and I was up all night. I couldn't sleep. I was just like ramped, dude. So do not take more than the recommended dosage. I made that mistake, and I don't take it every day. I take it every other day, and then I alternate it with the other ones, right? Like Chalk Daily or the 7 Wonders. So yeah, it's been great. No criticisms, nothing but positive comments from me. And if you go over to chalk.com, you'll notice like countless 5-star reviews, like tons. Estrogenic Rage of the Soyum, $5. Have you ever reviewed old spy movie in like Flint? We need to. Many years ago, I wrote an essay about my top 10 favorite old spy movies, and we talked about 3 Days of the Condor, which is really good. And I actually pulled out a stack of old spy movies, and a couple of the old Hitchcock spy movies have things like Fake Flags. You've got things like honey traps in Hitchcock's Notorious, right? The Cary Grant character is a raven, right? He entraps Ingrid Bergman. So there are plenty, and then there's the Third Man. There's Spy Who Came In From the Cold. There's tons of old espionage movies that we definitely need to get to. I just forget. There's so many things to do, so many things to analyze. I forget a lot of these. And by the way, it's going to be a real treat in the Rockfin Part 2 that we're gonna do here in a little bit. It's going to be about 30 minutes because I'm going to give myself a little break, and then at 11 we'll go live over on Rockfin. That's 30 minutes from now. For the Part 2 of this, I'm going to get really deep into On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because the George Lazenby outlier, right? If everybody remembers, there's the random George Lazenby Bond. So there's one installment of Bond played by George Lazenby, and believe it or not, there's some really crazy stuff, MK Ultra and more, stabby stuff in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So we can't pass that up. And then I'll do some deeper analysis of the others, and we will get deeply into the full analysis of No Time to Die over on Rockfin. So thank you guys. Everybody have a good night. Give me about 30 minutes and join us over there on the Rock, right? The link is in the show description if you want to go over there, and we can speak a little more freely about, things that aren't on lockdown. They got my voice on lockdown. We got your voice on lockdown. I can't talk about stuff. I'm on lockdown. There's a little spirit that will spank my mouth like a damn sass mouth child getting spanked if I talk about things that I can't talk about. So it just makes me cry. So in order to avoid weeping, in order to avoid all that drama, just come on over to the Rock, baby. And we'll do that here in a little bit. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed this deeper analysis of Bond that we didn't get into today on Alex Jonas, if you know what I'm talking about, as we did the 4th hour. Go watch that show, by the way. Today's 4th hour of Lord Voldemort's show was amazing. Everybody said it was out of the ballpark. It was a hit. So go watch that. Right. I'm sure everybody here is smart enough to figure out where that is. Some of you boomers, you can't don't know how to use the Googles. You can't find stuff. Well, I'm sorry. I guess you just won't watch it. But everybody else who knows how to work these things, right? Go find it and watch it. It will take you about 30 minutes. And